Hey, well, welcome. Sorry about that. Welcome, Sandra and Alan. Good to see y'all here. This will be a good episode with the Greenshields. Just going to play the intro and then bring them up in just about. How's it going, everybody? We got James and Kirsty Greenshields fixing to walk in the door here. Let me see what these messages are. Yes. All right. Let me just pull them up. If these shows resonate, please share. We're getting hammered a little bit by these algorithms at Facebook, but we welcome the opportunity to be broadcasting on Facebook. Replays are on YouTube. And thank you for the continued love and support and all the Patreon people that have stepped up to help us expand this network. ¿Qué pasa?
Morning.
Good morning. Hi, James. Hi, Kirsty.
Hi,
Good
Todd.
morning.
There looks like there's some golden white light coming down in prisms over you. columns of rainbow light.
We were
So
just saying how you've got red in the back and we've got blue in the back.
yeah, I'm working on my root. All my
Nice.
my lack and limitation and security and survival. Just letting it go. I was taking a long walk after the first two shows, and I was like, this whole thing about surrendering to all these multidimensional aspects and other dimensions and all that stuff that comes in. And then I thought to myself, well, what about the human? Can I not surrender to the power of the human? Can I, I mean, I'm trying to surrender to the power of all these other things. I'm not like looking at all these multidimensional things and going, oh, I don't like that part. I'm going to separate myself from that part. And I thought, well, with the human, I try to separate myself from different aspects of the human, if not the human in general. And maybe it's time we surrender to it. I don't know. But I was happy to see that y'all were on. You sent over, or you made a post. Kirsty made a post and mentioned a few subjects, and I resonated with them. I can't recall what they are.
And I didn't see the post, so.
And then James said he didn't know what we were going to talk about because you're so good at asking questions.
Yeah. Well, it's been a really powerful, and I don't know, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a comfortable, good thing either, but it's been a really powerful, I think it started last night or maybe yesterday afternoon. Well, over here. And so it's now 6 p.m. Eastern time over here. But today I had to take, well, they weren't naps. You know how like sometimes that energy will come in or whatever that is, and you just got to lay down.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had two of those and a long walk and some pretty powerful shows. So this is a good way to end it, where we get two perspectives. Two heads are better than one. One of the advantages of going through this with someone else. But yeah, you'd mentioned some topics, so I'll open the floor to you, whatever you'd like to talk about.
Well, the first thing that I wanted to say, Todd, was just what you're saying about surrendering to the human. I totally believe that, because our soul decided to come into this human body, and the work that I do is now called embodying the sacred, and the sacred is us. You know, it's our soul, and that surrendering to the human brings our soul completely into our body and allows us to connect with another human at that soul level. Because if we're not surrendered to this human, then we actually can't fully connect to each other on a human to human basis. So I totally resonate with what you're saying about surrendering to the power of this human, because that is actually where our power lies.
We can start to get caught up in that, in non-dualistic thinking and oneness and everything, and then forget the fact that our soul chose to incarnate at this time in this form, and there's a massive reason for that. I was with you yesterday. I mean, I had to go and I slept yesterday afternoon because I came out of working with a professional football club that we have around us, and I went up and I was in that energy for a whole day. And because their consciousnesses are all at varying levels, and I chose to engage and hold my level, coming out of it, you know, it's still a level of, it's like fitness. You know, if you want to go for a run and maintain the run, you've got to maintain that level of fitness, is what I've found for myself. And so, yeah, I had to sit down yesterday and do my Sudoku, because I like Sudoku, and I went off to sleep.
Surrendering to that nap is so important.
Yeah, I think it's important. The rest is important. The water seems to be important. I've noticed it in the physical changes in my body. My body's telling me, you know, like showing me, like I can tell when we have, or when I have intense nights or active nights or releasing nights in dream state, because I can tell by my body, you know, I can see it purging stuff. I read a post today and I thought of y'all, and it was about relationships, and it was very cool. I wish I knew who had written it, but it was basically from a woman's point of view, talking about, well, I say that it was both, but from the woman's point of view, talking about how she, and going back to the human part, the surrendering. I mean, this Helios Gamos, this sacred union that's personified somehow in the ethers and in the other dimensions that's being embodied here, again, without, per this author, without her surrendering her human in trust to him, and I guess vice versa, it doesn't happen. And then on his side was the other point of view from the masculine, was understanding that the darkness or the unknown, the womb, is held by the feminine energy, and that's something that we're not used to as masculine, as men, but that we all have it and we can all reach that place, but it's an important part of these relationships. I thought it was a profound post, and I'm gonna have to find it. You have any thoughts on that?
Plenty.
The feminine as the physical manifestation, it, again, like this human form, it is the unknown, isn't it? Every single day we try to organize the chaos, we try to make some sort of plan, but actually we don't know. We really don't know. All we can do is listen to this body, to this physical manifestation, and allow it to guide us where it needs to go. And you know, this, the only way that we escape fear, and I think yesterday when I wrote about what we might talk about, is because there's so much fear and anxiety, and I'm sure it is the same in your country. There's so much fear and anxiety right now, and that's all up here. Like, none of it's real. As soon as we come down into this physical manifestation, which is the feminine, like that real ability to be able to connect, we lose that anxiety because we connect into the mother and we feel what's real. And the anxiety and all of that dissociation really disappears for us.
There's a lot talked about the mother, and I love it. I go bush often. I'm going bush again at the end of the month with a bunch of men, and men love nature, they love the mother, but it's not just the mother. It's this divine Hieros Gamos. It's the divine union which transcends the mother, and it's the masculine meeting the feminine on equal terms. And that's what's called the dance. Like, Men fear women in their power. Just look at society. When a woman enters the room who's an intellectual giant, who's a personification of everything that a man struggles with, there's little things that they'll attempt to cut her off at the knees or something like that, and they'll put obstacles in the way. And it's, you know, we label it as a patriarchal society. You know, it's fear.
And it's so fascinating as well, because as a woman, we also, as a woman who, for me, I was in a masculine environment, I was in the military, you know, it's the same for women that are in corporations, we actually fear our feminine side because we're afraid of where she might actually take us.
Tell that story about going and presenting to that bunch of women in the military.
Which part?
Well, how you were received?
It was, this was, gosh, how long ago? It was like 12 years ago or something. And I was first starting to be able to stand up and speak in public and things. And I went and I was invited to speak to a bunch of female senior leaders at an organisation. And they were military female senior leaders. And I decided that because they wanted me to speak about networking and mentoring. And so from my experience, there would have been some projection at this point, because I was still projecting onto the military and what I saw as bad. But, you know, in the army, for instance, which was my experience, it's like 8% or 9% females. And so it's a huge minority. The thing is that they're all trying to step over each other to get noticed by the men. So they think that they're a woman in a man's environment, but they're actually just a man in female skin. And I was exactly the same. You know, I'm not, yes, I say there was projection, but I could say that because that's exactly how I was. And when I called that in that environment, I had opened up to starting to allow myself to feel. And I came home and I was really quite unwell, because I literally felt as though I'd had daggers thrown at my chest standing in front of those women. There's probably like 100 daggers thrown at me that day because I called that. Because when we've been in that environment, when we've been raised in the way that we have, we're afraid of our feminine nature.
And there's a massive difference. Like, neurologically, actually, a woman's brain is more aligned with leadership than a male's brain, because of the access through the corpus callosum to the right hemisphere. And the leadership traits required come from the subconscious mind. But the point is that so many women choose to lead from a masculine space. And, you know, I've gone to many conferences and been asked to talk on manhood and masculinity. And I've walked away going, no, I can't talk about that, because you don't separate masculinity from manhood. You don't understand that it's one element of manhood. And we just don't get that.
Well, you know what? That's thought-provoking, because maybe as we integrate all polarities, including masculine and feminine, you know, so much of our journey has been about our story, you know, and in one way or another, we think certain things are unique into ourselves, which they're not. One of those to include pain or suppression, or whatever it might be, which is not unique to one or the other. It may be more prevalent and it may look that way on the surface, but maybe what we're talking about, if you use the military as a microcosm, what's the difference between the world and the military? I mean, it's all patriarchal. And so therefore that impression has been embedded in all of us. And so I love what you said, because James started out by saying men fear a strong woman, but then Kirsty said a woman fears a strong woman. And here we are back to the same, probably our greatest fear, which is fear of our own power. And obviously, if this has been off balance from the patriarchal impression and program, then it's really, and I think this post I brought up earlier today was saying the same thing, saying that it is the feminine in all of us that is afraid to step up, and that will. It's not a matter of we will. It's just a matter of who starts going through those doors first, man or woman, you know. And I have to add child, because more and more of these children, as you already know, because you've got some there and you're going through the transition with them, are starting to exhibit no fear,
Mm.
no suppression, maybe because they don't have the conditioning or whatever the case is, but their frequency definitely is more balanced, even if they don't know it. And that tells me that their intermarriage or whatever is more balanced. Their feminine frequency has been exalted. Their false masculine either wasn't there or it's been brought down a few notches.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because when I started fatherhood, one, I didn't know what to do. I did it semi-consciously. Like I said, yes, I wanted to be a father, but I didn't know what yes actually meant. And so I was in a time in my military career where I was just about to get the golden job that I'd always wanted, which meant that I would, command troops on the front line, and that I would deploy on operations, and everything about my supposed identity as a person / man would be tested. And so I ran to work as opposed to being at home. So, before I deployed to Iraq, it was 10 months of us cohabitating, but we were both emotionally caged and we were separate. And we didn't have the emotional literacy to realize I had stuff going on, but Kirsty had stuff going on as well. And Kirsty was manifesting me doing what I was doing, including running off to war, because of her own programming and her own wounding that was giving her the opportunity to heal. And
because the masculine was more important.
Yeah, complete suppression of the feminine, and the masculine was there. Now, if I was to tell you that the first thing I thought about when I was hit by a roadside bomb was my men, I'd be lying. The first thing I thought about is right here. Yeah. And Abby, who's my daughter. Now, they were 12,000 kilometers away though. And I didn't have emotional literacy to understand what was going on for me. So what do I do? Natural inclination, just push it down and bury it so deep that, it took me 2 years of searching to find it. And in that 2-year process, post-traumatic stress, depression, almost taking my own life, everything like that happened. But the first thing I thought about was that which was most closest to me. Now, a lot of people don't understand the masculine too well, because they talk about protection and everything.
Well, and I've also got an issue with toxic masculinity, because as Todd was saying before about the polarities, that term toxic masculinity is not helping us at this point in time either.
And it's fighting. We talk about surrender.
Yeah.
My place in life at the moment, the thing I'm working on at the moment, funny enough, I've just put to bed my men's program called Awakening the Warrior Within, after 8 years of running it in the bush. And it needed to be put to bed. I actually did say I put a bullet in it, and then I realized that's probably not surrendering. That's probably still fighting, James.
There's resistance. A little bit of resistance.
I'll put it to bed instead of putting it to death. But it's now like the name will morph, but it's called Transcending the Fight, because my journey is reflected a lot in my work. And the point is, I'm now, the biggest thing is transcending all fights, transcending a fight in my relationship here, my relationship with my daughters and everything like that. But come back to this point that I was going to say about, being in the bomb site. We were there for 10 hours before we were able to fight our way out. And I refused casualty evacuation in a helicopter, because in my mind, I was going nowhere without my soldiers. Now, people, and I used to use that as an example when I was still healing. I'd use that as an example of the false masculine, the bravado, you get too much testosterone and everything. What I refused in that story and the way I told it to acknowledge was my courage in that moment. Yeah. It literally took me 10 years to own the courage that I had in that moment. And in owning the courage and telling the story one day, I actually got transported back to the side, and I realized what was actually coming out of me, and why, if the person who hit me by the bomb had raised his head, I would send him to his God. It was actually from love. And people go, how the hell does that happen? It's because, sure enough, I got myself into a situation. Yep, let's not talk about the past. Let's talk about the present moment. I'm now in a situation, and it is a life and death combat situation. My heart is for my men, and also not just for my men, but to get home to that I remembered first after being hit by the bomb. And if we want to transcend the story now, Abby was with me when I got hit by the bomb. She woke up 12,000 kilometers away the instant I was hit by the bomb, and screamed for 45 minutes uncontrollably. And it was Kirsty who nurtured her and was with her, but she was the portal that allowed Kirsty and I to connect in that moment. and actually be there, because it wasn't just the three-dimensional combat bullets and bombs that was actually happening. It was so much deeper on both higher and lower levels that was actually occurring, funnily enough, in the shadow of the ziggurat of Ur, the 6,500-year-old temple to the moon god, where Moses supposedly brought the Ark of the Covenant back to. So we're talking powerful land and powerful portals into multidimensionality. So there was things happening on multi levels.
And you were only able to, you said it took you 10 years to actually acknowledge your courage. You were only able to do that as a result of acceptance and self-forgiveness, which leads to self-acceptance. And that's that descent into the feminine, into James's own feminine, because men are afraid of their own feminine as well. So it was the descent into your own feminine, which allowed you to self-forgive and therefore accept yourself greater, which then allowed you to pull in that masculine and go, I was really courageous in that moment.
And that, the demons of shame and guilt that I dragged with me from that battlefield into back here left my soul back on Iraq. And you talk to lots of soldiers and they'll say, I've only partially come home. Because they literally do. A lot of the work I do with returned servicemen and trauma is actually, it's not just returned servicemen, actually. Just what I've in my work I've realized is that trauma is, it's the same. It's just the environmental stimuli is different. So everyone experiences trauma. So you don't have to just go to combat. You could be abused in your family home or workplace harassment.
Yeah, that's very true. You know, I was talking to David Manning from England this morning. I didn't know, we'd had him on the show twice before, that in 2000 and then again in 2010 and then like 2 years ago, he's had 3 bouts of cancer, which was precipitated by being HIV positive in 1994. Wow. And, you know, he has this incredible story, as the individual goes, so goes the collective. Great messages. But I was just thinking, I was like, you know, there's so many people that have had things far worse than I ever experienced in, like, say, my 2 years on the streets when I started this thing, and people dying and separation, incarceration, just all kinds of crazy wildness. Like many people that have come on the show have talked about successive traumas. And I look at it and go, I've suffered very little. But the reality is, to your point, James, is everybody's pain's the same. It's just looks different. It's proportionate to their own experience. So everybody has felt the many dark nights of the soul, so to speak. And then the other thing that you say too, which I think is really, really important. So, okay, it's so hard to differentiate as we try to integrate, but so she is afraid to step into her power, fear. And some of that fear, most of that fear, I would assume, is coming from the lineage, is coming from the ancestral stuff, from being suppressed, oppressed, raped, brutalized, murdered, burned, the whole 9 yards. And then the same goes for him. It's just coming from a different angle. He's afraid of her power. How do we merge those two things? How do we break this untrodden ground? Because we haven't been there before, not female, not male. And we're trying to drive the same resurrecting energy or balancing energy to come forth, which is the goddess energy, the mother goddess energy, the divine feminine energy in each and every one of us. So it's a good question. I don't have the
golden question, but to go on about the divine goddess, the divine feminine, remember, in all mythology, the goddess is actually feared because she has a very big dark side.
Well, Kali, look at Kali.
And also Lilith, you know. But the thing is, we've romanticized in a lot of this Hieros Gamos talk at the moment. I'm seeing a lot of romance, and that's awesome, you know. And we need to, because it's half the dance. But there's this dark energy which also needs to be looked at, and I don't say confronted anymore, but looked at and merged into. Lots of people, sages of old, have always said your actual true power lies in your darkness. One being
like
Jung.
Carl Jung says this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a really good point. Now, you know, we're talking. She's Morgan has scheduled, I think, 15, 18 couples this month. So we're trying to like find, you know, push the ball up the field. We don't really know what to do or say or what questions to ask, but you just hit on something. These relationships, as far as I can tell, they're obviously very different. The word romance doesn't even exist sometimes, not by the old definition. It doesn't, you know, be it like light body going through, or a body going through transformation toward the light body, or stuff coming in that's a higher priority. The disengagement or detachment from lust. I mean, there's all these factors, but they're definitely driving the sacred sexual vibration to a higher level, which is also, I guess, when you get right down to it, the root of our creative power, the root of our power in the physicality, or whatever you want to call it. We know that sexual intimacy and such was tabooed and suppressed and shamed for a reason. There was a reason in the design. But I guess what I'm saying is that this is a component of these relationships as I see it. There's no question that on the other side of it, just like every single crisis or every single, ebb we go into, there's an expansion on the other side. We're kind of figuring that out now, all of us. So it doesn't always make it easier in the middle of it, but so I see it the same way. I see it again energetically, that the couples being a metaphoric physical example, that finding that path, which to me is some of the things that you talk about, are the frequency of what you talk about: purity, integrity, loyalty, nurturing. I mean, so much of it is virtuous, with that beyond cliche. So it's it to me is one of the seemingly one of the important characteristics, attributes, or contributions from couples, whether they're same sex or different sex, whatever. Just the power of that union, that love, creating that third energy that I call it the Trinity.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much you've just said, actually, where to start and what you've just said. One of the no, I'm not going to speak. Don't need to.
If you know it, don't say it. If you know it, you don't have to. Why do you have to say it if you don't know?
You just surmised it. I don't need to add to the vibration you just put.
Well, I think where we're at, though, and maybe that's why the opportunities presenting itself to have couples, broadcasted here and other places, or to be seen, is because, look, I mean, for me, I think we talked about at the beginning about the human. If the human's not doing it, then it's not happening, no matter what you're pulling in, and so what's that like? I don't think we know. I mean, it's
well, we're all just testing it out, aren't we? We're all testing it out. We're all going, well, is this it? And we can't know. It's that exactly what we were talking about earlier. We can think we know, and we can try to put an answer to it, but actually the more that we explore and the more that we know, again, we realize what we don't know. When you were talking before, what was resonating for me was that our sexual experience has changed so much over the last 20 years. And the removal of that lust and, the need to do it like rabbits and things like that, that doesn't exist anymore. But the connection that we have when we come together, and I always say that when I'm talking about it, the act of making love for a woman is the ultimate act of surrender, because you are forgoing all boundaries and letting this other physical being enter you. So that experience for us has even in the last 12 months has enlivened and become so much richer for us as we continue to explore this soul relationship within, and then the Trinity, as you're talking about, and what we create together.
And what I find, with me, I see it reflected in other people, men particularly, when we talk about sexuality, is a fear of losing the lust, because they don't understand the difference between lust and passion.
Yeah.
And that's correlated also with emotion. So anger has a very similar vibrator energy of passion. And until a man walks through the anger doorway and gateway and truly transcends that emotion, to be one with it, not to believe they'll never experience it before, but to know when it happens and therefore utilize the message it's giving me, as opposed to being abused by it. So I move through the anger gateway and I can then truly embrace my passion. And so when we make union, it's like there's a lot of passion involved. It's like, I thought that I couldn't explain where we are now to myself, when we first met 20 years ago. And it wouldn't make sense. I could speak the words, but I wasn't over a hold of vibration for that conversation, which is why so many of the ancients or the elders of society, we ask them a question and they appear to be speaking in tongues, riddles, or just they don't appear to answer the question. They're giving us what they know we can hold in that moment. Our nation is an amazing nation. Like, if we look at this land and the people on it, there are many elders in our Indigenous community which are not transmitting information and knowledge to the junior generations, because they know the power of that information and they know that they can't hold that vibration. So they keep it closed. And they know that that'll go into incubation or dissolve. That it's there, but it cannot be transmitted. So, it's the same with young people. We've got to go through this period of understanding ourselves, sexuality and lust and everything, to be able to transcend, to come to a place where things are really passionate. I've lost nothing, gained everything, but I couldn't tell my 20-year-old self that.
Yeah.
No. I can relate to
experience.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that, even if I talked to myself from a year ago or 6 months ago. No, seriously, because I can't even go there now. If I want to go to lust, I can't go. Not even if I'm by myself, right? You know what I mean? I can't do it. And and you're right. It was confusing, but enough has come through to let me know, like, don't get in a rush. This is new territory, one step at a time. And the thing about, you were talking about earlier, about the elders, that's profound. I get that, because from our experience, whether it be in sacred sexuality or any other aspect of this transition we call ascension, you have to reach it's say half, I hate to say have or need, but a certain level of purity. And I don't mean purity as in pious or Puritan, I mean purity in the multidimensional sense of the word. Virtue, purity, illumination must be reached in order to receive the information, like, analogously from the elders to the younger people. Because, and I've even heard people talk about stargates, like when we come to a Lion's Gate 88. I had a vision, and there was Illyrian and Syrian, and there was, dragons that were guarding the Stargate. And basically the short version of it is, the person can't go through the Stargate until they align with the frequency of the protectors of that Stargate. So, metaphorically, it's all the same thing. And I go right back to where we started with the whole human thing.
Yes, I was just going to say.
Yeah. Well, there we are with the telepathy.
To where you're talking about surrendering to the human, because our soul chose this body. So is it aligning with the frequency of those beings? Is it actually acceptance of this choice that I've chosen this human form, which is the higher vibration, releasing the fight and realizing that I'm actually home in this human body. I don't have to go off anywhere else. I am actually home because I chose this home in this lifetime.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because we get caught. Well, I say we get caught up. We have been introduced to multidimensional aspects of ourselves that come in all forms and fashions, and it's different for everybody, but it's all the same. I think one of the things that is coming to me as I observe and within myself is that there's a multidimensionality, there's a multi-humanality. There's the physical body, there's the emotions, there's, the mental, and so on and so on and so on. And every single one of those multiple aspects of the human has to be in alignment. And as somebody put it earlier today, Lou Martin, I think, he said, our bodies as they stand would not be able to survive in this environment 5 years from now, 10 years, 15 years from now, because everything is changing, including our bodies, and anything that's blocking us from getting to a higher frequency or a less dense frequency is what we're dealing with. You know,
Mm.
a big part of that is in the masculine feminine arena, whether it be a relationship or the one within ourselves.
Mm.
I get that completely. And there was in my journey, there was a shift in my paradigm that occurred a few years ago. And it changed the way I relate in life to pretty much everything. It started on my darkest day, when I looked at the girls and I looked at Kirsty and I said, I'm bringing too much pain to my loved ones. I'm responsible for that. I need to leave the planet. So I'd already asked for help. I put my hand up and I was getting help, but my self-awareness went up. So my self-trust went down straight away. And that's what often happens for people putting their hand up from a dark place, is they'll become more suicidal actually after they ask for help. So I was going through this journey, and I'm sitting on the couch, and I remember the couch explicitly. And Dad came to me. Now, Dad had passed in 2003, probably 7 years beforehand. And when I was 8 years old, we were feeding out. Now, Dad was an amazing character in my life. He was a priest, a farmer, a chaplain in the army, the police, and the country fire brigade. He was a Vietnam veteran, came home with his own demons from war, and transcended to a point, turned very internal to his faith. But if I wanted to kick him out of the cattle yards as a 16-year-old, give me 2 minutes and I'd push every single button I needed to, and he'd storm off in a fit of rage. He was not my anger, sadness, fear, shame, or guilt role model. He was my love role model, however. And anyway, one day we're standing on the back of this ute feeding out, or this truck, like this little truck, I think you guys call them. And there's a bunch of Angus cattle behind us, and we're feeding out. And in this back block, there's this bush, like forest, and we're overlooking it. And Dad's gone silent for a moment, and I'm just looking at him, going, "What's going on?" Because I remember back to that bush. I really feared that bush as a young man. I'd found Aboriginal artifacts and stuff. There was lots of stuff I'd closed down to for fear of that place. And that was actually calling me. That bush was really calling me. But at that time, I didn't feel I had what it took to step up to go into it. But Dad turned to me and he goes, "There's my God." Now, he was an Anglican priest, the Church of England. And I'd been baptized, that had confirmation classes by this stage, and, you know, a little bit of Sunday school and religious education at school. And that did not make sense. That wasn't a big old white guy sitting in the cloud. That's nature, you know. But I shut up for a moment. And then he looked down at me, and with these eyes that I remember, that was the engagement of the eyes, he said, "But you've got to go and find your own."
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have the spiritual literacy to actually understand what he said back then, but the moment I remembered on the couch, I then remembered also Viktor Frankl's amazing statement from Man's Search for Meaning, when he said, "Suffering ceases to be suffering when meaning is found." And so I had a mission, and I was an ex-army soldier, and I was good at missions. So give me a mission. My mission was to find the meaning within my suffering. And so I did. I found the meaning of being hit by the roadside bomb. I needed to be kicked in the groin to wake up to my priorities in life. And one of my priorities sitting right next to me. So the point, though, is that started me on this deep descent into the division of religion and spirituality. I didn't understand that the two were separate, or could be separate, because of the way I had perceived. It wasn't what my father said. It was the way I interpreted what my father had said. Yeah. So then this massive division happened, and I started to have some pretty out there experiences. And then a shift happened a few years ago, even further, because I kept thinking that I was a human wanting these spiritual experiences. And now I actually see myself as a spirit having a human experience.
Yeah. And
so you talk about the multidimensionality of the human, you know, the mind, the emotions, the body, and then the spirit. Well, and every tradition talks about, every ancient tradition will talk about at least those four. I've realized that. And so therefore, if I'm a spirit having a human experience, one of the biggest things to look at is death. And I look at it and look to transcend the fight into death, because that's the ultimate. If you look at it as far as our life goes, everyone asks, what's the opposite of death? And people will straight away say life. Life's not the opposite of death. Birth is. We forget birth's the other side of death. Yeah. And we're so fixated on it as a society. Just look at the coronavirus. It's hilarious. So for me, my journey has been to embrace me as a spirit, having this experience. And as you say, coming back and understanding what this human experience is in this moment, and then choosing from that place to go, how do I want to engage the world?
Yeah.
And then that looks after itself. That's when I gift myself over to the divine in that terminology and go, right, what's my next step? What's my next step?
And we stay present in this human form because we don't have to have it all figured out. We only have to know one step. And I was telling a story yesterday. When I was in my yoga class, and my teacher said something to one of the students, and she didn't want to go up into a pose. And my teacher said, "Don't anticipate that it's going to be painful. Just try it and see what happens. And if pain comes up, then we can deal with it." And I thought when I was on the mat doing something else, but I heard her say that, and I thought that's really profound, because we do anticipate that death is going to be painful. What if it's not? What if death is this beautiful, just surrender experience? And Ram Dass made a quote about something about, when I realize that I'm going to live, I take a breath and open my heart. When I realize I'm going to die, I take a breath and open my heart. Same thing. And what if we just took one step and then took a breath, opened our heart, and then see what happens next, so we can do the same thing? And don't anticipate that it's going to be painful. And because the first thought that came up for me yesterday was, like, I don't know if you guys have had the same issue, but there's been this toilet paper shortage in Australia, which is just
what are we going to do without that? I don't mean to make fun of it. That's funny.
Because people are anticipating pain, and we're so afraid of death. We're so afraid of letting go of this grip that we have on reality.
Let's bring it back to us. Like, for some time, I was afraid that Kirsty would leave me. Why?
Yeah.
As a 16-year-old, I turned to my mother and I said, "Leave the asshole." Now, my mother and my father were married, and happily married, I say, because happy was the predominant emotion in their relationship, because they did have ups and downs. But as a 16-year-old, I see a man who actually was going through an incredible amount of pain. I judged him for the pain he was feeling, not for his soul. Yeah. And so therefore I close myself down on any ability to receive from that soul too. So then when he passes and I step up to the plate to become a man and actually allow myself to heal, I have to actually forgive myself for closing my heart to my father. That was one of my biggest things.
Yeah.
I mean, that had actually, by the way, turned me homophobic and racist and a lot of other weird stuff that my mind decided to go down. But anyway, I say to my mum, "Leave the asshole." And, I thought I was protecting my mum and everything like this. Dad was just grumpy. There was never any violence or anything that lots of people have experienced. Dad was just being an emotionally abusive and mentally abusive individual at the time. Sorry, it wasn't being, that's incorrect language. He was behaving in that way. Yeah. So bring us to Kirsty and myself. I developed two really quick strategies because I've got a bit of a mind on me. And what I do is, if we get into this argument, I go, right, and I would go really quick into spinning this argument into nothing, so that there would be no argument. The argument would just dissolve. Or I do another thing, because of the way I'd chosen to bring myself up, which was I would take responsibility. So one of two things: I'd either spin us into a point of just confusion, and so the argument would dissolve, but it would never go away. That was the issue. Or
of course,
I would take responsibility on, and that would breed resentment to me. So
both breed resentment.
Both breed resentment, yeah. So I'm standing in the kitchen in 2010, and I'm just about to enter into an argument with Kirsty, and I've gone, no, I'm just about to accept responsibility for this. This isn't my thing. What am I doing? And I started getting really grumpy at myself. And this led to this big dialogue. And then we started to get to the causal issue. And I started owning the fact, I'm actually really scared you're going to leave me, because I really am afraid of that. And, people have been telling me, all my friends have been telling me I was fighting way above my weight when, you picked me up. But it goes on record too on your program. Kirsty picked me up.
Morgan used that comment to me the other day, and I didn't understand it. No, I get it. What she was saying.
Bloody Aussies.
She wasn't talking about me necessarily, but she was. We were watching a movie or something like that, or having a discussion about these things. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I attracted her into my life, and so if I'm not good at owning like me, and you know, we can say magnificent's cool. I'm getting used to. I'm quite good at a lot of things. I've got my shortfalls as well, so I'm embracing my shortfalls at the same time, and that actually provides me lots of amusement. But the thing is, if I embrace all, if I embrace all of me, then like I realize I attracted her into my life, and I've given her every opportunity to leave in 20 years. But in 20 years, today she chose to wake up next to me.
Yeah.
She actually chose to wake up next to me. So I don't need her in my life anymore. She's just gone to a women's retreat for 10 days in Fiji. And like, people said to me, so you're batching it. Are we bacheloring it? Do you guys have that same terminology?
No, I get it.
Yeah. And I said yes initially, and then I stopped in the conversation because it wasn't fitting with me. I go, no, I'm trioing it. And they're going, what? And I said, I'm having a trio experience, Dad and my two daughters. We're a trio. Sorry, this was a quadruple thing. It wasn't a trio
Quadruple. I'm quadrupling it.
Yeah, I'm quadrupling.
But that's interesting what you said about her. Okay, because I can kind of tell you something that's been helping me. Now, I think we all lack. We all are on an evolution of our spiritual confidence.
Yep.
You know, each and every one of us, because of these myriad, things that we've had, experiences that we've had, and it's hard, and because we come out of a place that there was a lot of judgment and damnation, condemnation, sabotage, and all that. So we've really done a hell of a job. We've kind of moved it up the ladder. Then you get into this relationship, and I look at Morgan sometimes and I think, holy shit, she's amazing. How does she do that? And then I remind myself, like you do, and I say, wait a minute, I've attracted her into my life. We've been together long enough. Obviously, I'm of equal vibration. I must have some things that may not be the same exact thing, but they're on the same level, you know what I mean? And so that started to help me kind of go through certain things or maintain my balance during the day. Because it is extraordinary to see someone who has these incredible attributes, and we're all made up of an infinite number of attributes and frequencies. But to see them from the seat of the soul, from the heart, and just it's as profound as some of the personal experiences and epiphanies and revelations and episodes that we all have within ourselves, and when we go, wow, like I'm really something. They gave me this information or this ability, but it's the same thing. And it's interesting because you see it in another person in these couples. It's for me, it's I think a softer method of the mirror. It's more ease and grace involved, as opposed to being told something and you're like, I'm not like that. And then you wake up like 6 weeks later with your tail between your legs.
Well, what if we were able to, because so often we'll see bad stuff and then we'll go, oh, this is obviously in me, I've attracted this bad stuff. But what if we naturally started to look to the beautiful and saw more of the beauty and focused on the beauty? How would that shift for us? And it shifts things profoundly, which is exactly what you're saying, because I realize I attracted this beauty into my life, which means that it's within me, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to resonate with it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like the whole, I am that, but I'm not that over there, and I'm not that over there. Well, if you break the same thing down into the old school relationships, why can't you do this? Why is he like that? Why is she like that? Why doesn't he change? Why doesn't she change? This is a different type of thing. This is a different type of thing. There seems to be, regardless of what the old patterns are, there seems to be a higher guidance, providence, whatever, has moved these two people together. And there's lots of examples of that. And that seems to be what pulls people through. Because we're rewriting the book. You know, all of us are, all 7.7 billion of us are. And it's not been, you know, it's you know, the what is it? The higher the challenge, the higher you must leap, you know. I mean, so we all, you talked about courage. I think we all have courage. And I think we've, you know, if we look at the human journey, you know, for however many thousands of years or whatever, uh, and look at that as a singular person, that's a hell of a hero's journey, you know, just to get to this point, even if it ended now.
Yeah.
I reckon actually the next step is to realize that the greater level of courage is to keep our sword sheathed,
Yeah.
to not draw our sword.
Yeah.
And you know, if you look at resilience, the resilience is one of the biggest buzzwords in society at the moment. And in my humble opinion, one of the most misunderstood ones, a bit like empowerment. But resilience requires an adversary. Look at the definition of it. It's the ability or capacity to bounce back or weather a storm. So therefore, I need something to have given me something to bounce back from, to inflicted a hurt.
It's about anticipating pain, isn't it?
It goes back to anticipating pain. So go back to what you started the conversation with about surrender. And the biggest courage I feel in life is to surrender. And they say, you know, when I've done so much principle and value work as a gateway of going back to answer the question, who am I? One of my most fundamental principles has been freedom. And for me, it's represented by the wedge-tailed eagle, which is an amazing bird that we have here in Australia. And the more I've connected in, and when I want to truly connect into the essence of that, to that experience, I just imagine myself dropping off the cliff, and I get picked up by the thermals, and I'm on the thermals, and I just feel that oneness. So therefore, the freedom for me is coming into that place where my wings aren't doing anything. I'm actually just going with the flow, which actually therefore means the flow is being guided by something bigger than me, but I'm at one with it. Look at a surfer on a wave. And that complete surrender to the moment. So therefore, the more connected I am feeling, the less I actually have of freedom, but I gift my freedom over.
Yeah. It's a paradoxical, inverse kind of relationship, weird quantum equation. But yeah, I get what you're saying. And that's why it's not so easy, because it's not like anything we can measure our, lack of a better word, success or growth by, is there was nothing to measure it by, because there's been nothing to be measured. We only know how to measure from the old way, like how much money you got in your bank, or how long you've been married, or how many children you have, or you know, how many awards do you have, you know what I mean? One of the things that I noticed it's come in too, we've been very public about a lot of things, like you guys, and so it's been this whole Soulogy thing, you know. As a masculine energy, you are there to create, you know. She's the dream. You take that energy and you turn and you start to create, almost like as a testament of the love, you know. And so having to shed the old, you know, warrior, you know, like, I'm going to go do it, man. I'm going to go do this and I'm going to go do that. You know, that real hard charging up the hill kind of thing. And so I had to let all that go. But now what I'm noticing is that there's no fear. There's a knowing, and some action's got to be taken. But what I'm noticing about the action, and I'm not saying I've done a whole lot of it, I'm getting there, but is that it's a soft, the sword remains sheathed. It's a soft action. And I got to believe it's the masculine feminine energy balanced, or maybe maybe I'm feeling the softness of the warrior masculine. I don't know. But whatever it is, it's nothing I'm used to, not in these past few incarnations, and certainly not in this incarnation. But to me, that's a good sign, because for so long we saw her out there in these communities in the world. And you're really starting to see that take root. But there's still that impression that's embedded in all of us of the patriarchal, like you were talking about earlier, Kirsty, that even the women have to deal with, you know. You know, it's almost like the women had their identity, or let's say the feminine energy had its identity. Everything got turned upside down. They're now dealing with an opposing gender energetic energy that is falsely empowered, unfair, unjust, and you couldn't communicate with that. The feminine energy could not communicate with that. There's no language for that. So you had to go into the irrational to communicate with a frequency that's irrational and doesn't make sense. But I think we're coming out of it now, and I think it's due to couples like yourself that are making a huge difference, and really any two people, any two souls that can find that pure unconditional love, elevating trajectory. It could even be an animal and a person. You know, it could be anything. And it's impacted whether a million people know about it or nobody knows about it. It impacts this whole experience.
As you were talking, Todd, I was just thinking about James has talked for a long time about his principle of wonder. And when you were talking then, it is almost the masculine embracing that principle of wonder. And I believe wonder is a masculine principle because it's really trusting and believing and knowing spirit has my back. And that when we do allow ourselves to embrace wonder, we can take step after step after step because we know that everything's going to be fine on the path. Like I'm going to, as long as my intention is highest timeline, highest good, highest divine order, then I can keep embracing wonder.
It's like wonder for me directly links to my values of adventure and exploration. Whereas when I was unbalanced in my masculine feminine dance, then what I found myself is a frantic need to search. So I would read like profusely. I would do the next thing to find out more information. I didn't have what I needed, so I frantically searched. And funnily enough, if you find a person losing their car keys of a morning and they're frantically searching, and how many times like are the car keys right in front of them, or their glasses, they're missing their glass, the glass are on their head, you know, because they're frantically searching instead of stopping, pausing, being in the moment and engaging wonder. And then everything shifts from search to exploration. And when I explore, I don't come in with an agenda, but I gained so much just by the experience.
Yeah.
It's funny what you say too. Like I've got one of the things that I used to talk about on the warrior program was a warrior will never draw their sword unless it comes from love. And lots of people go, hey, what? No, it doesn't make sense. You know, you're in anger and in fury. No, in the purest essence. A warrior will never draw their sword. A hero will draw their sword for external validation, acclaim, etc. And, you know, I ran to war a hero and I came back still a hero. It wasn't war that made me a hero, it made me a warrior. It was almost dying that made me a warrior. The breaking into light that made me the warrior. Oh, a correction, that I chose to embrace the warrior would be a better way of saying that. But yeah, you know, yesterday I drew my sword. And an amazing man in my life who, you know, I love and would take a bullet for if I needed to, I launched. And I give you the big tip, we live out bush and, you know, 10, 15 kilometres away is Mullumbimby. And Mullumbimby heard me dress down this young man. And I explained that you never in my presence use your wife or your loving family as an excuse to stay stuck and not be who you truly are, because that is the essence of cowardice. And you will never again in my presence bring that cowardice in. Do you understand me? Now, I said that very, very benignly, actually, in this presence. You know, he got it. He got rocketed. I actually gave him a notice. I gave him 3-second warning. I said, man, I'm just about to bring the USS Missouri and go broadside on your ass. Get ready. And I went to...
Wow.
Because I did it consciously though, you know, and I did it measured and I watched myself. I put myself into observation. Kirsty comes in later and goes and looks at me and she could feel that I'm balanced. It's fine. Because I'm observing, because I see where the energy's stuck. So it's right, cool. What I gotta do is just crack a nut and then the nut's fine and the nut will germinate and be all good. So that's what he did. And so he texted me back last night and says, thank you. Why? Because we've lost the ability of compassion and empathy. We've lost the ability, I'm going to swear, so if you don't like it, please close your eyes. We've lost the ability, ears, eyes. Australians, we listen with weird things, man. But if from my heart space, harden the fuck up.
Yeah.
And harden the fuck up. And I'm here with love in my heart to help you, but I'm not going to do it for you.
No.
And right now you're being a victim.
And we were having this conversation about empathy this morning, because for me, my path of empathy truly started when James came home from Iraq and was complete victim consciousness. And I had to learn to, you know, when I went through depression, he allowed himself to spiral down with me for a number of reasons, but he was definitely very sympathetic to my plight of being a victim at that point in time. But because I'd learned when he came home, I'd learned so much more. I decided to take a different tact, and you know, I wanted to be compassionate, but at the same time, I wasn't prepared to get pulled down into his victimhood. And I think that we've lost the art of being able to sit with somebody and just let them go through it, but then call them on the hard stuff. And you know, those of us that obviously we do things, but a lot of in general society, we have lost that. There's this confusion about, should I speak? Shouldn't I speak? Am I going to be politically correct? Am I going to be offensive? And again, it's a loss of wonder.
It's an evolving slippery slope. You know, it's well, because, you know, and I've mentioned this a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, it's like, now that we have this higher level of awareness and we see everybody as ourselves, and we understand the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto them. But doesn't that also mean that if you love me truthfully, that I would want you to tell me that you would call me out on my shit, you know? But we're still, you know, there's still enough shadow that I think that's what you're talking about. Is like, we're getting to the point now where we're not really walking on eggshells, but we're certainly being respectful and honoring the fact that, hey, we all went through this. You know, we're still like coming out of it. The fire's not too far behind us. But yeah, I think we do. Well, it would only make sense. I mean, in telepathy, no one's going to have to call anybody out because everybody's going to know, you know? So it's like, but yeah, I think we're bridge builders. And yeah, and I think another thing that these relationships do is they bring out, can I say this? Yes. Can you say it in a balanced way? Can I say it in a balanced way? Can I really, you know, maximize my empathy both ways? You know, like, am I shadowed when I say this? Is there something that I'm not seeing in myself? You know what I mean? Why is this bothering me? Am I projecting, you know? Because, you know, as we elevate, we're obviously seeing things we never saw before. And it doesn't always just come in right when it happens. Like, oh, you know, it's more like, oh, where did that come from? Why is this back? Well, it's because you're higher up the mountain now, you know? Yeah.
When you look at Resonance Academy, faculty groups have just done an incredible tour of the Egyptian Giza Plateau, and they're finding stuff that has been in front of some of the most looked at archaeological items. They're finding it, it's actually right there in plain sight, but no one's seen it. Why? Because we weren't at a vibratory level to actually do it. And when you're talking the Giza Plateau, you're talking ancient mystery schools, which, you know, you had to be at a certain vibration because that information was, you know, the direct connection to the divine in its purest form. So yeah, it's a massive thing that we're starting to. That's the dog. Speaking of animal connection, the dog's been at our feet as we talking.
Wants to be heard.
Yeah, and the chook before, I don't know, when you're talking about the feminine, the chook started squawking. Now, if you've ever seen a rooster mate with a chook, that's rape. There is no other way.
We lived in Kauai, and we lived with them every single day. And Morgan used to make all the funniest jokes. But yeah, she'd be like, "My God, is that all you got?" You know, it'd be like boom, and they're gone. You know. And but yeah,
so
I get what
she's a recovering, recovering chook. But she wanted to say hello, and she always squawks actually when we're talking about feminine.
Oh, I heard you've got lots of roosters on Kauai.
Oh my God, they're everywhere. And that's the
Sure.
first thing. And that's the first thing that Morgan noticed when we got over there. Over a year ago. She said, "Oh, because because it's just part of the whatever. I forget how it all started or happened, but so the chickens and the roosters and they all run wild, right?
Yeah.
And so so you go by the little stores and stuff, and they have all these like 3 roosters crossing the road, like the Beatles on Abbey Road, or just different things, different sayings. And she says, "Well, what about the chicks, man? Yeah, the chucks, I think y'all call them. They're not saying anything about the chooks. Yeah, the chooks. And whatever, I can't say it. But one of the things we noticed is we would go to this little baseball park, like 2 minutes down the road from where we lived, just so we could be outside. And she spent a lot of time every day. She started feeding the orphans, and then they got to know me. They jump in the car with us and all kinds of stuff. But the funny thing was, when she would throw the food out, the hens would basically take food away from the badass roosters and just like totally blackball the roosters. I mean, they couldn't freeze them out, and it was hilarious because it showed where the real power was.
Mm.
It's interesting. The animals are talking to us, there's no doubt about it. Can't make this stuff up.
We've covered a lot of ground, man. We've talked about chickens, mating habits, and multidimensionality and quantum physics.
Well,
That's cool.
yeah. So the one thing I want to make sure I hit before we go, not because I'm biased, but because I think James, both y'all, you actually brought up a really good point about this wonder, the curiosity. I like, a man can be a boy, and unfortunately, a lot of times, all of us might look at that man and say, "Why don't you? He needs to grow up," But there is that little boy thing that's part of this comeback, that we're getting reacquainted with. It's okay, and I'm reminded of this this American movie with Tom Hanks. It's called Big. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah.
So the scene where he's a little boy in now a man's body, and he goes and he's got that chick that he works with, and they go to his or her apartment. I don't remember. And so they're about to get intimate, and she's about to pop her bra, and she flips the light off, and then he flips it back on, and then she flips it off, and then he flips it back on. But that's the curiosity, that's that part that I think we're coming back to. And I think that's a little bit different for the man. There's things that are different in our journeys, but I think that and I think the feminine energy actually appreciates that within themselves, or within their partner or whatever, that can be retained, the Peter Pan element.
Exactly. And also remember, Peter Pan loses his shadow, and he's like frantic because of it. And then Wendy's the one who sews it back on to him. Touche.
So, that was a very good point.
The other thing is that I've got a deep inner child, and I've got a very, very playful self, which is why one of the reasons why I work with young men and young women on rites of passage programs, helping them come into them, flower into themselves. But for so long, I had my inner child in the boardroom, and he was making decisions. The inner child belongs in the playground.
Yeah.
And I go into the playground a shed tin of times. That's a quiet way of saying a lot in my lexicon language. And like I really enjoy the playground. But if it's decision making time, then it's James who comes up. I've got a nickname. Yeah. It's called Cheese, and I got it, and I held it in the military for so long. And someone called me out on it in a workshop not too long ago and said, "Why do you run from James? James is the name of a king. It's majestical." And I'm going, and I knew he was projecting at me, but at the same time, I knew he triggered something in me. So I just worked with him on what he was projecting, and then went away and dealt with my own stuff. And I realized, yeah, true. I've like pulled this cheese on as a mask, as a facade. And so I went and really explored that. And I realized, and I let go of cheese for only a couple of weeks before I realized cheese is my little inner child. And so, mucking around with some footy players the other day, and they laugh because I'm called Cheese. Most of them have no idea why I'm called Cheese. Doesn't matter. It's a funny nickname. So you know, and I'm dancing in the playground with them. But if I've got to then stop and look strategically about what's going on in the situation, James comes out. James comes into the actual boardroom, and that's a big distinction.
Wouldn't you say though that that it was necessary for you to take the little boy completely out of the picture for some time, because the little boy isn't the king? So because what happened for you was that you lost that sense of playfulness, that sense of wonder, and you became really serious. But it was a necessary part on the journey because it helped you to understand the king within inside. And I think a lot of men don't, in the patriarchal society, they don't actually get to know that part of themselves. They don't get to know the true king.
Disagree, because I was an army officer. I was a frontline soldier. I was commanding 110 soldiers, so I should be taking myself serious. Why aren't you
smoking?
I had an excuse. I was hit by a roadside bomb. Damn it!
James now. I wasn't asking.
I should be taken seriously. Damn you! You owe me something. You know.
That's right. Hey, you don't understand my story. You don't understand who I am. And you know, the crazy thing about attachment, I don't know if that's the right word, attachment or identifications that we've had to, or that we try to remove and release, is there's another side to it. It's the woo-woo stuff that comes in, and we like attach to it. And like, you know, like, so what's the difference between me saying, you don't understand my pain? You know, it's different than yours. It's far worse than yours or whatever. And then, or me saying, hey, you don't know who I talk to every night. You know, I'm the son of Merlin or worse, you know, whatever, you know, but don't forget that part of me. No. But I think this is another thing that's been happening in the community this year, as I've seen, and it's a very beautiful thing. I've seen people, especially some people, prominent people who have really been pulling down intel for like a long time, you know, like 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 years, starting to pull in that human, you know, like you can't do it without the human. They're not letting us out of here until, they're not letting me out of here or you out of here until we hold that human at the same level we do all these other aspects, including those things we still might see as outside of ourselves, Archangel Michael, Jesus, Kuan Yin, whatever, you know, it's
because
a requirement.
Those elements, those beings see the human as magnificent as well. I mean, you only have to look at the way the human body works. It's amazing.
But have a look at that, because in the East, it's as opposed to the West will say we call upon an archangel.
Yeah,
they invoke it.
Yeah.
And invoking actually means embody it. And if you go back to, then we diss Western tradition and we don't understand Western tradition. You mentioned mentioned hereditary bloodline and lineage of pain. Lots of people will escape their lineage to attempt to heal their pain, but I recommend that at times. At times, it might suit, but at the same time, come back to your ancient belief systems within your bloodline, because they actually are so rich. And Gnosticism is an amazing form, you know, and it will actually talk to you about embodying this stuff as well. And people would say Christ consciousness is not actually about sin; it's about ignorance, and not freeing the world of sin, but freeing the world of ignorance. So when I go bush, though, to speak to your other comment about keeping it real, when I go bush with men, now I take them into the bush at night, and this is sacred territory up here, as the whole globe is. But there are special points while they're on the globe, and they come back profoundly touched by an experiential moment in time where it was transpersonal, transcendent, and they experienced something they haven't done for a long time. They remember it, and as way back to a child. What did Christ say? Christ said, "You'll enter the kingdom of heaven when you look through the eyes of a child." So we go back to that oneness view. But I bring them back around the campfire there very, very soon thereafter, and we sit, and there's tears and there's just buzzing, and it's electric, it's palpable, it's tangible. And then I finish the conversation with one statement: keep it real. Remember, you are a spirit having a human experience, and that human dimension is absolutely constant. So please never use an excuse, I'm doing the work to me. Cool, you're doing the work, awesome, well done. So am I, so is everyone else. in their own way.
Yeah, it's like the one thing we did not bring into this incarnation or a series of incarnations was the human. Well, that's why we came here. All the other stuff is stuff we've done or been exposed to or code that we have or whatever you want, memories or whatever you want to call it. We have all that. And I love what you said about the Eastern, because I sometimes struggle with their I don't know, I want to call it insensitivity, but I don't know. And I know it's a different language, but what I'm trying to say is that you know, it's the Eastern. You were saying, what did you say about the Eastern? You were saying
They invoke.
They invoke the
yeah,
deities.
oh yeah, because I find myself doing that now. I think I've did too many shows in the last 4 days. I'm starting to go down, but and it's like, so I used to lay down, and it's got to be like everyone's not everyone, but a lot of people have got to go through the same thing. You lay down and you put your hands together or whatever, and you start to reach out to something external. And now and then I got to a point where I was like, well, who am I talking to? And now I've got to a point now where that's the right word. I'm invoking. Like if I have an issue, I'm saying, I'm going to pull up this part of me now. I would like to speak to this part of me now, or I would like to empower this part of me now, or let it take front and center. Let it take the point, So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that's maybe starting to bleed over into the Western world now, because it is closer to the truth. This is all an inside job, way beyond that cliche, Yeah.
And, you just got to look at Western history to realize it's just remembering.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we would say. We teach no one anything. We help them remember. It's like that aha moment. It's because all of a sudden you've cleared out the trash vibration, the clutter, and you're going back to your purest vibration, and you get it. It's like coming home. Aha, light bulb moment. It's I'm coming home. I can't teach you that, but I can help you remember it.
Yeah. And all of us have got it inside us. It's like you said, I'm going to call on this aspect of myself right now. And if you go back to when we're talking about the masculine and the feminine, and divisive arguments in society say, look at domestic violence, for instance. This is a man's, men need to speak up about this. This is a man's job. And yes, men are resisting taking action at the moment, but actually it's the masculine element in all of us that needs to step forward, because these things happen because of a lack of boundaries and our ability to use our voice. So it's the masculine, true masculine needs to step forward right now. That's
a great point you're making, and thank you. And that is the sword is sheathed. That is the what you're saying is it's that masculine, but it's not the one with the sword out in front of us saying, come on. It's the one with the sword is sheathed, and you're right, it is coming out in all of us. And it is, in some way creating a space for her so that she can now step up and expand that throat and bring what we've been lacking. This is good. This is a good conversation. I'm really glad to have ended this marathon this way. So just a quick word on anything that you guys are up to that you want to expand awareness about, websites and links, please put them in the comments, and you can and or mention them now as well.
I suppose, the program I've got happening at the end of the month, if you're a man who wants to go bush and work out how to actually transcend the fight, how to keep the sword sheathed, but at the same time, really stand in your own power and explore that, then it's a 4-day bush experience in the northern rivers of New South Wales in Australia, and it's a pretty magical experience. I go there all the time. Why? Because every time I go on one of my programs, I learn something from someone. So
that's why we keep doing it. And the other thing is that we also have a Young Warrior, and it is still called Young Warrior. And our Young Warrior is happening in the April school holidays here in Southeast Queensland in Australia. So that's also on the Facebook page of Resilient Leaders Foundation. And Resilient Leaders Foundation is having a bit of a facelift this year too, because as James said, resilience requires an adversary, and we're transcending the fight now. So
we're letting go of resilience. The work we do in the leadership space is called harmonic leadership, because we need to transcend sustainability. It's still based in a survival mentality. If you go to the thriving mentality, it's all about harmonic, which sees the natural cycle of life and death. So, all our leadership work is actually understanding. The first, you mentioned purify a lot before. The first step of harmonic leadership is purify self before you unify your team to amplify your impact. So, I was really resonating with everything you've said today, Todd. Thank you so much for having us
Yeah,
on.
it's beautiful, man. I love sitting around with y'all. You guys are awesome. And thank you so much for what you're doing. Keep going. Don't stop. Stand tall. All blessings to you and yours. And until the next time.
Thank you. Wow, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.